crowd event.
What?
Actually, they were thinking that was going to be a tough crowd event. It would have been Iris. Yeah. I'm going to talk to them right now.
Hi.
So if Gene, we'll probably need to say sit. He's going to be really tired. 10 minutes from now, he's going to be pretty tired.
Yeah.
Is the microphone detachable to?
Yeah. So let's go take a look at it.
It's not detachable per se,
Okay. But you can bring it. Yeah.
Eric, can I get a little bit of help doing this?
Yes.
We're gonna move it over there. Here we go. Oh, actually, not right here because we need to.
It's so closer to the oxygen bottle.
Okay. Then we can always move it. We also got a boutonniere. I wonder if that's So we're gonna move you over a little bit when it's your turn because this microphone has kind of a cord, and we'll move it down for you. Notice the flowers came with a boutonniere. Dean, would you care to wear one?
That would be wonderful. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't see these throughout the Jewish funeral, so it definitely stands out. Yes, and it has an iris on it.
Oh,
Perfect.
Papa.
Oh,
We're gonna
yeah.
have a boutonniere with an iris on it. Your boutonniere. We're gonna attach it right here. When?
Yeah.
Everyone's.
We do have that.
Where would you like it, Papa? Is there good?
Maybe we could kind of drop them back.
Towards him
I
or
was
away?
wondering if I go and I go through there.
Yeah.
Or do I go I know, Eva, do you break to do this? Yeah. I was thinking start inside with the flowers, but there's two pins.
Because I also
You want it there? I'll put these to the side for now, and then after we lay her
Hey.
tag on top,
How you doing? Good to see you.
Marsha. Thank you so much for coming. That's the awesome day. It's great.
right here.
Where Allison, what?
Yes.
Yes. All the guests are arriving and about to take their seats.
Yeah, so you can maybe move it like a little bit. We can see move it as much That's true. Yeah. Another thing we can maybe change that. Okay. Yeah, so maybe
Yes, I was.
okay, yeah. We'll be here to move.
Okay. Gotcha.
How are you feeling?
How are you feeling? Temperature. Okay.
How are you feeling temperature?
We have the flowers here in their vase, so you're saying that before the lowering, you place them on
service municipal place. It is. There's some.
Casket's coming out.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so what we're gonna keep it there because we're gonna put it in the room so we can like face the camera too. So we're gonna have a little bit yeah. So we can take one of these. Okay, so there's also these that.
How are you? Good. I didn't recognize you first. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's my friend Shepherd.
We're all about to begin the service. If I could have the pallbearers please meet me in the back of the coach. 4 to 6 will suffice. Okay, and then everybody else go ahead and take a seat. And please be sure to turn your cell phones on to silent or airplane mode. Okay, thank you all so much, folks.
So, hi everyone and welcome. I'm Rabbi Emily Hyatt. In just a minute, we're going to get started. We actually begin our ceremony this morning with a brief tradition called Kriya, which means tearing. I am going to give some ribbons. We give our ribbons first to those who are considered direct mourners, which is parents, children, siblings, and spouse of our deceased loved ones. But I'm pretty laid back about the ribbons. So if there's any grandkids that want to have a ribbon or any anybody else want one? So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna pin these on. So we tear for a couple of reasons in Jewish tradition. We tear because this is hard and it hurts and it helps to do something physical and to rip or, ruin something. Quite frankly, it makes us maybe feel just a little bit better. We tear because this is a rip in the fabric of your family. And we know that. That's one of the hardest parts about this experience and today in particular. We also tear because for those of you that are here, I'm guessing you did a whole lot of caretaking for Iris over the last several, I think, years, certainly in the most recent past. I know that it's a lot when our loved ones are ill, when they are on their way out of this life or this world. And part of the reason why we tear is because it signifies a change in your status. You have taken good care of her. You have done everything that you were supposed to do for her. You got her all the way here to this beautiful space on this pretty beautiful day, a lot less cold than we thought it was going to be. And now you get to take a deep breath and know that you did it. And we change your status from being logisticators and organizers and form filler outers and all the things that happen when someone is sick or when someone has died, and you become mourners. And we hope that you will let us take care of you as you have taken such good care of us. And so I'm going to have you repeat after me. We're going to say a line in Hebrew, and then we're going to rip that ribbon just a tiny bit. So you're going to repeat these lines. We're going to say Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Nevorach. God has given and God has taken away. Blessed is God, judge of truth. You can go ahead and give your ribbon just a little bit of a rip, maybe a half an inch. Then I'm going to say one more line on your behalf. Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Blessed is that judge of truth. And that formally begins our service today. And essentially, we're going to move this in a second. Yeah. Hold on one second. I'm so loud anyway. You can hear me, but I want to make sure that the folks that are. Yeah, I'm going to speak first. We're just going to move this so that there's not a pull. Got it. Put it right here. Okay. Yeah. Amazing. I'm going to be a little. And then we're going to be doing this. That's good. Good. Okay, good. Perfect person. Okay. I'm going to turn it on. See how it goes. Can you hear me?
Okay. That's good.
There's essentially three parts to a Jewish funeral that we're going to participate in today. The first thing that we do is prepare ourselves for the hard work of saying goodbye. The second thing that we're going to do is hear a little bit about the story of the life of Iris. It's part of our duty at a Jewish funeral is to tell that story and to talk about her and her life. And then the third thing that we'll do is say goodbye to her physical presence here with us. And mostly the first two parts are to prepare us for that third part because it's hard and it hurts our hearts. As we prepare ourselves for this moment of saying goodbye, we do that with our psalms and our songs and the poems of our tradition. So we're going to start with a poem. It's called A Sacred Pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey from childhood to maturity, and youth to age, innocence to awareness, and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, and loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude and pain to compassion, from grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made that journey at all, stage by stage. A sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, and life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage to life everlasting. And we turn now to a poem or a psalm that is just a little bit older than that one. There is a piece of our text that we use at almost every Jewish funeral and at lots of funerals that are not Jewish as well. It's the words of Psalm 23, which you probably know the famous line from, as I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. And often we think that when a person dies, that's where they go, to that valley of the shadow of death. That's how I used to read that psalm for sure. And then I learned that perhaps there's another way to understand that it's not our loved one who is in the valley. That's not what happens. We don't really know what happens when we lose people, but we go to the valley. And so listen again, but imagine that it's you walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And we're not afraid because we're not alone, even if it's hard. And one of the things that I really resonate with is that idea that losing someone makes us feel really low. That's real and it's true. And we feel low down and we feel like we might never reach a peak again. But we know that's not true because the psalm itself says we walk through that valley. And so part of our job today is to lift up all of the beauty and the light of Iris. I read her incredible obituary and feel like I already know her from just the words that you shared, even though I didn't know her, because she had a lot of light and a lot to teach and a lot to say and a lot to do in the world. And I feel like this psalm is a reminder that even though there's a shadow at this moment, because she's gone and you miss her, that her light is still there. We just have to look for it and find it in different places. I'm going to share with you the words of the song. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, bino deshayar bitzeni, al mei menuchot yana haleni, nafshi yeshovev, yancheni b'magalei tzedek lema'an shemo, gam ki elech begeitz al mavet, lo ira ra ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha, hema yenachamuni, ta'arof lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, Dishanta Bashem and Roshi Kosi Revaya Ach Tovech Chesed Yir Defuni Kol Yemei Chayai Veshavti Beveit Adonai Leorech Yamim. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. God, you lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. And even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies and anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. And so with those words in our hearts and this idea that we have this opportunity today, even in our deep, deep sadness and that deep valley, to look for those pieces of light that are for all of you, Iris. It is my honor to turn it over to you to tell the story of her life and to share those words of who she really was. And I think we're going to start right here.
Oh yeah.
Thank you for sharing our little words. She would love to be here to hear those wonderful things you were about to say. But she did hear those things before, many, many times while she was still with us. The wisdom, the kindness, the generosity inspired us all to make our love known to her. Iris was my constant companion. So emotional opera enthusiast, working mom, the soul of our family, dedicated grandmother. Great grandmother, she put out her hand to all the students who joined her, making the world a better place. From her grandchildren to her overnight PhD candidates, she never would tell people what to think. She wanted to teach them instead how to think for themselves. She never wanted her students to accept either conventional or unconventional wisdom. Her students adored her. Many have written about how they never would have gotten her graduate degrees or their graduate degrees without her help. She always treated the people who reported to her far better than those Iris reported to. She didn't care ever about labels or titles or rankings, or wealth or salary or awards. Always not important to her. She punched up, not down. Iris felt her purpose academically was to remind people to not accept quick fixes at a first glance, and she insisted on quality research and a good argument backing up anyone's opinion. In her career in education, research, and policy, she publicly declared the same bold statement. She hated the bullying of misinformed people who misled us. She hated the politicians when in the 1980s they claimed American kids were falling behind their international age group. She found those people to be misguided bullies who would ruin the lives of happy children by unfairly comparing them to vastly different samples of children in China or Japan or Russia. The fact is, she hated comparisons. She couldn't stand them. She would never ask. She would never be asked. Would never accept being asked whether she liked Verdi or Puccini better. She never would stand for a comparison. She never would ask. She never would be asked. Who is better for me or for that? She never would ask that. Which of her grandchildren was? Mike. Never fill in that word. Don't be ridiculous. Don't be anybody, anything, anyone. That's what was important to her. Nature of her being. She was a contrarian. Reading Education Journal made its list of 5 contrarians in education policy. Guess who made this one? She never gave advice on the fast. Even then, she said that the judgment of our children are fragile. She never said anything. People in relationships, friend, never had second guess. When they asked what was important to her about her grandchildren, it was never asked by her or of her how they were doing, or how well they were, or how well they were performing against somebody else's measure. It only mattered to Iris whether her children and her grandchildren were happy and finding fulfillment by their standards, not anyone else's. Her life centered around her family, her friends, her operas, and her work. She loved going to work. She loved work. At age 91, halfway across the country from the home she spent her life in, she was still taking calls from her students, from doctoral students who were looking for a counselor who would make their life better or healthier. When we finally reached Iris, it was exactly what she got. I would brag all the time for her friends that she graduated first in her class, first. 500 students at Bethlehem High School. She was awarded her degree, her PhD from Johns Hopkins, when she was only 24 years old. She was the second woman in 50 years at Johns Hopkins to have received a doctorate as a woman in experimental psychology from Hopkins. She brushed it off by reminding her granddaughters know what the Colorado said at Johns Hopkins? Men preferred. Message delivered, she ignored it completely. To know how Iris loved to contradict and provoke in her field, just listen to the title. The titles of her most read articles which were published worldwide. Listen just to the titles over 50 years. 5 myths about test score comparisons. The endless search for silver bullets. Is anyone listening? Academic jargon, the illusion of objectivity. How do all those dumb kids in the United States make all these smart bombs? I never promised you first place. She was the ultimate contrarian. Our first date was listening to the opera Othello in Philadelphia. She didn't even like opera at that time, for that's shocking now, because she was totally obsessed with the subject. Later, she told me with it's a good idea to have the first date Othello, the hero's son in his life at the end. Her insistence on maintaining her own point of view extended to the operatic world. She thought Maria Callas and Jane Savonarola was considered by many to be perhaps the most accomplished soprano of the 20th century. She looked at it and shrugged, as if it were a bit overrated and would never take off. Over 70 years we were together. We saw literally hundreds of operas together. Verdi was one of those, remember, not the favorite, but just one of her favorites, because he was the one who could put together the most subtle personality characteristics into song and into beauty. To earn her praise was a great victory for most mortals who were not among her grandchildren. She never was impressed by other people, by anyone. Nothing would impress her, except maybe Bishop Desmond Tutu. Sorry, son-in-law. Sorry, Jim. One thing you may not know about Iris is that she won thousands of dollars in football pools, being the sharpest of the sharp among stockbrokers who competed, lawyers and real estate salesmen, her daughters, her granddaughters, her grandsons. She won by doing what is always done by Iris. She believed in research. In this case, the research was the Las Vegas latest line. She waited for everyone else to mess up their opinions by believing they were smarter than the most reliable statistics. And every dollar Iris won for the wise guys in gambling, that was 10 times more precious to her than her salary at George Washington University. She couldn't care less what her salary was. Some people, true to the way they're looking at the world, she was a great tipper in restaurants. When someone else in the group gave what they thought was an adequate tip, she would always quietly slip the waitress a solid 25%. She did not try, even though, try to shame the other tippers, unless it was me. Some people talk about the fear of missing out. Iris instead had the joy of joining in. There was not a single country that she did not want to visit or even revisit. And only she among us would insist on getting it all. There was not a single grandchild graduation ceremony that she did not attend. Even if it required halfway around the world to get there. Preschool graduation, kindergarten graduation, Suzuki recitals, 6-year-old soccer, treated gifts, graduation. All the grandchildren remembered that she was the keeper of celebrations. The first text to the group for every single holiday. She wished everyone every day that they would be happy. Her only regret in the last few months when she could not do it over again. Minutes before she was dying, she wanted to do it again. And she was afraid that she could never come again. I closed with one of the hundreds of letters already received from our family and friends who have written as follows. From the time we began working together in 1982, you have seemed like a rock to me, anchored in a shared commitment we all should have to love each other and to make things better for themselves, but for all, not just for ourselves.
I told Mike that I was going to try the first paragraph, and if I can't make it through, I'm forking this over to him. And note to self, I won't be following my dad again. About a month ago, my mom asked me what my favorite memories were of my childhood. And I didn't really answer the question, partly because I was tired after a long day of caretaking and meals and cleanup and medications and laundry and so on. But more so because I was worried that my answer would likely disappoint her. What she might have wanted to hear were memories of some of our trips, going to Greece and visiting the Parthenon, strolling through open air spice markets in Israel, or seeing the Impressionists or Roman antiquities at the Louvre, or listening to a symphony, or seeing Swan Lake at the Kennedy Center. But the truth is, although I enjoyed all of those things, well, maybe not the Roman antiquities, whatever the hell those are, none of them were my favorite memories. My favorite memories were the simplest of simple things, like when she would tell me in the morning that she and I would be going school supply shopping after dinner, where I'd get to pick out new mechanical pencils and notebooks. Or the memories of how the two of us would always stop by the Danish bakery after my orthodontic appointments, a fun tradition that went on for years. Or decorating for a party, or having a special birthday dinner on our screen porch. Or fun things like when my sister and I would go flying down our long flight of stairs to the basement rec room on beanbag chairs. So in many ways, my mom and I were kind of a harmonious mismatch. She was the more intellectual traveler, theater, politics, books, and opera lover. And I was happiest when I was at home, having family friends over on Sundays for pizza and football, playing concentration on the dining room table. Sometimes my mom would fold little boats made out of paper, and I would put Scotch tape on the bottom of each boat and float them in the bathtub. My favorite memories included those types of things, like waiting for the ice cream truck on hot summer weekend days. And they rarely came because we lived in a cul-de-sac. Playing catch with my dad before my softball games, ice skating in the creek behind our house, and coming inside to make hot chocolate. Sometimes I would ask my mom to stop working, quit her job, so she would be home when I got home from school. We all know what Iris's answer was to that. Not only was being a worker and a contributor a non-negotiable issue for her, she kept winning the argument by working 30 years past the time when most normal people usually retire. One last example of our differences was that my mom was the most moral, ethical person I knew. Me, not so much. Once, when I was a teenager and we shopped at Sears, we walked away from the store with a piece of clothing they forgot to ring up. And in the parking lot, I was like, woohoo! We got that for free. And my mom was like, nope, back we go. And we marched back to the store to pay them more money for an item that was rightfully ours. I know what you're thinking. Wow, Pam is an immoral shut-in. Can we go back to talking about Iris? Let the record reflect that my parents did manage to pass on a love of travel and culture and adventure, just so that you think I'm not a total loser. And I have enjoyed trips with my own family to every corner of Colorado, Japan, Iceland, Paris, Argentina, and to China to complete our family with Hayden. And there she is. And even to a museum or two, as long as there was a gift shop. But despite our differences in personality, there were many, many things that connected us. Our mutual love of gambling. Yes, she loved casinos and blackjack. She took me and a few friends to Atlantic City when I was 16, even though I was too young to gamble. To groom me, maybe? I'm not really sure. And together we participated and competed against each other in yearly football pools. She had a streak once where she won 4 or 5 years in a row, and I had a streak once where I lost 4 or 5 years in a row. She won thousands of dollars, and all without being able to name a single football player. And of course, later in my life, we were completely in sync on the most important thing. She loved my children as much as I did. Watching her be a grandparent has been one of her greatest gifts to me, and something I will try and emulate. Once or twice a year, my parents would go on extended 2 to 3 week-long trips around the world when my dad was working at the World Bank, to China, Japan, Indonesia. And my mom would get to accompany him on those trips. I would worry about these trips for weeks and weeks ahead of time, asking my mom for reassurance. How long will you be gone? And are you coming back? As a young child in the 70s, there were also scary political issues that I was aware of. Scenes from Vietnam, the Watergate scandal, threats of nuclear war, and images of pollution choking us. I remember being worried about my parents' safety and dreaded when they took these long trips. And I would have this recurring fantasy, which I've never told anyone about until a few days ago when I told Mike, and now all of you will know, as being able to save my family in the event of emergency. I imagined that the way I was going to accomplish this was by creating a burlap sack. Kind of think about like a sack of potatoes type of bag with a drawstring. I guess the drawstring was so that we wouldn't fall out, and that this giant burlap sack would be floating with us in there, somehow magically in the sky, away from danger. I clearly hadn't worked out all the details of how we would get up in there, or whether we would have any food or water, or how we would be all comfortable jumbled up in the bottom of this sack of potatoes. I mean, was there a floor, a toilet, Wi-Fi? But somehow that wasn't going to be a problem, and we were going to be in that burlap sack together and safe. Fast forward 50 years to this past year when we completed our little house addition, connecting our existing house in Wash Park to a new small apartment where my parents had been living for the last 8 or 9 months. I realized recently what this newly built cottage was. It's my adult version of my childhood burlap potato sack. More architecturally sound, God, I hope, and for sure more expensive, yes. But the feeling and the purpose are the same. And the back hallway connecting the main house to the tiny house was kind of like an umbilical cord, right next to the washer dryer, a pathway that could never be severed. Until this week, that is, when it would seem like it actually has been severed. But now I see that building, this little pod, has helped bring things full circle. I was always asking as a child, when will you be back? How long will you be gone? And in the last year, in our little burlap sack of a cottage, my mom would ask me the same thing when I would say goodbye or goodnight. And I would say that I was going back to the main house for a bit to get Hayden ready for school or to take care of my own business. And I would see her later, a little bit later in the afternoon for dinner. And my adventurous, independent, brilliant, free-thinking mother would ask me, how long will you be gone? And are you coming back? I love you, Mom. And I want you to know that we are here with Dad and the kids you love so much. And our house will forever be filled up with you.
Do you want us to bring, or do you want us to bring the live stream? You were talking about both options. The microphone? Okay. Is that way you'd still see the shot if you want to come over here to do the back? Yeah.
Okay. Not easy to go after my father and Ted. I start this memorial to my mother, Iris, with the word Amen. That might seem like a somewhat religious reference and not fitting at all for my mother, who is not religious nor spiritual. But in looking more deeply into the word, I discovered Amen actually means certainty, truth. I can't think of 2 words that more genuinely capture my mother, and so it feels right to start with that thought. My mother, Iris, as we all know, was a phenomenon before a woman could even be such a thing. Iris burst into her little town of Bethlehem with a different sort of power. And as Madeline Miller writes about in her book Circe, only a few people light the sky like meteors and are able to reach the notice of the gods. Iris was one. Iris was special, most particularly because she was going to set her will to literally anything that she wanted. Nothing was too daunting for her. There was no challenge that she wouldn't go after, unless it involved the outdoors. Iris didn't have any interest in hiking or biking or swimming or skiing or anything like that, but she did love to view the outdoors. In 1950, Iris was valedictorian of her high school class. If you look closely at the news article, you can see that she beat out all the boys too. This was no small school either, but a class of about 1,000. They divided the boys and the girls. Each one got a valedictorian. But Iris, she got all of it. And unlike every other girl in this huge photo, Iris was looking to the side. Iris wanted to do her own thing and would not be told to look straight at the camera by anybody. Married 70 years to her love Jean, they were a striking couple, but she always had an interest in being more than striking. In fact, she didn't really have an interest in being striking whatsoever, even though she was an absolute beauty, unless her brain was involved in some sort of original striking thought or idea. Iris was so attentive to her 8 grandchildren and had an opportunity to meet her great-grandson, Harvey. And she was always determined to understand who they were as human beings. And she won the award for Best Responder in the extended family text thread. Iris always wrote supportive responses, but then gave her own unique interpretation or reflected some really fascinating association that no one else would have come up with. Right from the beginning, she said she wouldn't be known as Grandma, but as Iris, because she wanted to be seen as herself. Everyone who knew Iris knew that her work, her job, her profession was key to her identity. Outside family, it was what was most important to her. My mother was not interested in being a stay-at-home mom or gardening or baking chocolate chip cookies or doing anything having to do with the household, really. Maybe that's why she produced daughters who like to do that home stuff and have lots of children. And in the case of me, a weird collaboration of traveler, home buddy, occasional oddly ambitious go-getter, gardener. My mother loved to travel and go to the opera and ballet, and she was a Dr. Zhivago-loving romantic, but she had no hobbies, and I can't imagine her working in the garden planting a seed. I never saw dirt on her hands. Hobbies held no interest for her unless you count deep intellectual discussion and work as hobbies. Try challenging Iris to a game of Scrabble or the game, however, and you might as well give in before it began, because she was going to win every time. Cooking was the last activity that Iris ever wanted to spend time on, and she proved it by never making dinner for us during our entire upbringing. You laugh, but it's true. When I think back to our childhood to teen years, I can't remember my mother ever making us one dinner my entire childhood. It seems impossible, but it is true. She was much more interested in an intellectual argument, conversation, a discussion about some political subtlety for which she was endlessly curious, and going out for Chinese. But my mother also liked to make her own points. She knew she was always right. And if you were going to engage in an argument with her, you better be prepared, because definitely you were going to be wrong and she was going to be right. And there would be no concession coming because she was always right and had the better argument. A couple of things I learned from Iris along the way. Don't worry about what others think of you. Stand up for those that are disenfranchised no matter what. Choose a few subjects that really interest you and become expert in those. And if you don't know what you want to do, just do something anyway. When you're traveling and you're sharing paperback books so that other people can read the same book you were reading, just rip them in half when the first person is halfway through, and it's no big deal. It's not sacrilegious to rip books, and patience is not a virtue in Iris's book. Saltines and cottage cheese make lunch every day. You can never have too many scarves, even if you don't ever wear them. Children, and for that matter, adolescents, don't need limits. It was really hard to lie to my mother as a teenager. When you're trying to hide the fact that you tried an illegal substance when you're 14 in 1974, don't walk in the door where your smiling, trusting parents are looking straight at you because you're going to burst into tears. And when you quickly admit what you did without needing to admit it, or not needing to admit anything, they get more compassionate and understanding. There were many, many things that my mother excelled at. If you needed help on any document, Iris had otherworldly skills in that arena. If you wanted to win a football pool, as was already mentioned, Iris knew how to do it. Or ask her to join your football pool, and you would lose, and she would win every time. She never hid her strategy. She was very open about it, and she won several Washington, D.C. football pools with hundreds of competitors by keeping true to her very specific strategy that she herself developed. The interesting part was that my mother was the only person who would stay true to the strategy. Everyone else thought that she could beat the strategy, and they were wrong. Iris was always right with that. But deep down, my mother knew that she could beat the system, and she chose those times deliberately. If the catalog said men preferred, apply to Johns Hopkins anyway, because Jean is stationed there for the Korean War, and it's the closest school, and eventually they have to let a woman in. Might as well be you, and you can be the first of 2 women in the program to graduate with your PhD. My mother's moral compass, as Pam explained, far exceeded anyone's I know. It was straight as an arrow, and you always had the sense that she would do the right thing morally. There was no artifice, because she was always on the right side of everything, except in politics, where she was unabashedly far left. Thank you, Mom. Iris was a shooting star for the time she was a little girl. She was an only child, and she knew she was special. Unfortunately, tragically, when she was just 17 years old, her mother, Golda, died unexpectedly during a minor surgery, and that loss left Iris fearful. What happened to her mother was a tragic mistake, not fate, because my mother didn't believe in fate, or any mystical concept for that matter. When her mother died, her father Sam married the extraordinary Louise, and Louise was a second mother to my mother and our beloved grandmother, who made delicious homemade applesauce and peaches. But this next part is really hard to speak. My mother thought that she herself would never succumb to what we all succumb to. She thought there was something that she could do that would enable her to skirt what other people were calling the inevitable, or at least delay it indefinitely. Her father-in-law said that he had never met a person who had beat the rap, but Iris thought that was nonsense. You could beat any rap, and if you didn't, that was on you for not trying everything possible. She believed that something could be administered or tried or learned to allow her to avoid what happens to us all. If you were to challenge her ideas about this, she would say, of course, it's a ridiculous notion. Everyone dies. Cognitively, she knew it, but emotionally, she didn't believe it. That is one of the things that made the last several months very, very hard. She looked at Pam and me to save her from this fate that we can't even save ourselves from or our own children from. My mom was really a real innocent in this regard. Our mother, who was so brave in every imaginable way, struggled with this. As many people know, my mother always went to sleep between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. for 30 years. Going to sleep means that you have to miss out on some piece of life, or not get something done, or not read something you want to read, or not email somebody you want to email, or not continue or come back to the conversation that you've been having. And there's another dynamic that I believe relates to this and has to do with atheism, or the non-belief in a higher being amongst an inconceivable expanse of unknown. That non-belief then doesn't allow for explanation, comfort, protection that human beings rely on to wrap their minds around the concept of unknowingness and eternity. For an intellectual like my mother, the universe couldn't be made sense of. And because there's no fantasy or fairy tale that she herself would entertain, she wouldn't suspend disbelief ever, even for a brief period of time. Maybe that's why my mother always stated she hated fantasy literature and she would not read it at all. Our mother's last cries to Pam were, help, help. She had been speaking these same words for several days, but when she was fading, they just came out as a whisper. And when Pam asked, Mom, how can I help? Please tell me, how can I help? Very clearly, our mom responded, help me live. Mom, that some of us are still getting to dabble a little in all that is right now. One day we will all be together again in the all that was before, and all will be okay. Of that, I am certain. Amen. We love you, Mom.
Back here now. It's okay here.
Okay, here are the top 10 things that Iris felt strongly about.
That life's delicacies included stewed tomatoes, raw tomatoes, roasted tomatoes, and cherry tomatoes, and really just tomatoes in any form.
that going to bed before midnight is a sign of weakness, and the hours of 7 to 11 a.m. simply do not exist.
That apple pie should be all filling and no crust.
That quality time with grandkids may include doing something you claim you aren't good at, like drawing, but then perfectly copying a caricature of Madeline, Elsa, or Bluey to their delight.
That the 4 best places to visit are number 1, Japan, number 2, Iceland, number 3, Iceland, and number 4, Japan.
That we will, under no circumstances and in no context, ever call her Grandma, Bubby, Gigi, Nana, Mimi, Gam Gam, or Mima. And I quote, "I was a person before you were born, you know."
That charter is a 7-letter word, terrible in education, but great in Scrabble.
That working is life's biggest privilege. And if your work is teaching, that privilege is doubled.
That you always root for the underdog in life, but in your football pool, you pick the latest line every time.
And that a phone call with a grandchild must be a minimum of 90 minutes in order to allow for general catch-up, starting with the question, "So, what's new?" and then ample time for philosophical, political, and moral debates.
Just like you've taught us, Iris, we will edit, revise, contradict, question, and debate this list for years to come. We miss you.
I recently watched a home video from the day I was born. In the video, Iris said, "Wow, she's gotten even more beautiful in the time I've been here." And my dad quipped back, "It must be your presence, Iris." The word present stuck out to me because that is exactly what Iris has been my whole life, present. Present at important events, middle school, high school, college graduations, art shows, talent shows, plays, birthdays, and holidays, and most importantly, present in our everyday experiences and conversations. When it comes to her grandchildren, Iris is the most active listener, cherishing every one of our words with a thoughtful and intricate response. Now, when it comes to listening to her husband, Papa, no chance. Their conversations are about politics, religion, current events, finance, education, the arts, and their favorite subject, their family, is a dance with alternating leads that they have been dancing for over 70 years. Even with her busy professional and social schedule, Iris makes you feel like her time with you is her top priority, spending hours on phone calls, drawing outlines of our favorite books and characters to color in as a child, hours shopping and insisting on buying every item I tried on. I became hesitant to pull items off the rack because if I did, I knew it was coming home with us. We spent hours on plane rides, train rides, boat rides, and in hotels on our trips to Hawaii, New York, France, Italy, Australia, and more. Playing Scrabble, the game, and eating the sugary cereal and snacks that our parents wouldn't buy us. Iris is still undefeated in the game. I've still never won against her, not once, even up until a couple of weeks ago. Seeing plays, operas, ballets, and making sure that we read the synopsis so we knew what was going on. Iris was up for anything, a movie at 10 p.m., Great, she'd be up for hours later anyways. Iris was the one talking us into staying up past our bedtimes for more games, entertainment, and conversation. Iris took an active interest in the diverse hobbies, careers, and passions of each individual in our family, whether it was environmental activism, sports statistics, building, deckhand medic life, marketing, travel, TikTok. Iris was open to learning about new topics and always encouraging us to follow our passions. There are many things that make Iris special and uniquely herself, and I will always feel her presence in the way I have my whole life.
One more time. Give it just a little bit of it, and I'm going to read something that was sent, and then we will have the opportunity to say goodbye. Conclude our service in just a moment. Thank you so much. This is some reflections on Iris from Julie Eisenberg, who is Diana's friend. This summer, when I stopped in Denver to spend a few days with Diana, I wanted to see Iris and Jean. I miss them, these two surrogate parents I have known my whole life. Watching my mom lose her memories and sense of the arc and story of her life was so hard, and I wanted to sit with Iris and Jean and share my love of them and appreciation of who they have been in my life for over 6 decades. I was also hoping to cheer them up a bit and reconnect our families after the fast 5 years of separation that started with the robber, COVID, which stole time and joy away from us and our friends, and especially for Iris and Jean. It meant an abrupt end to their miles and miles of travel. It meant an end to open house gatherings and dinners and parties, things that with age would have diminished, but instead simply stopped. A tragedy worthy of an opera. When I came over to their Denver home, I was glad that Iris and Jean were surrounded by family, but aging is so hard. Iris wasn't really up for a visit, saying she didn't want me to remember her like this, meaning weak and frail and not sparkling. But eventually, with a bit of deal-making magic by Diana, we did end up talking and seeing each other and sharing some sweet anniversary cake, and I got to hear Iris and Jean reminisce about their wedding day, which had taken place 70 years earlier that day. And while we talked, I was flooded by random memories of Iris and the many times our lives wove together. First memories being at the Rotberg's home in Silver Spring and looking out that big back window that looked down on trees. In winter, you could see down to water that was a river or a reservoir that froze and people would ice skate on. They had a big family room and TV downstairs where we had sleepovers. Interesting, odd, and somewhat scary sculptures were there, and yes, we were told it wasn't scary, it was art. I remember gatherings to watch the Washington football team, named Redacted, where we would scream our heads off. I remember a desk holding plans for the Brickyard home, which seemed to be a project primarily involving Jean and Diana, but I'm sure that Iris got her input in when it counted. Somehow, I don't think that she came up with the idea of a spiral staircase leading up to a tower or a makeout room for Diana and her friends, but she must have liked the sheer outrageousness of it all. My strongest memories are of sitting in the family room at the new house on Brickyard Road, talking and snacking on plates of food that Iris and Jean brought in and arranged on platters so that we could watch the football game. When the game wasn't on, there was often opera blasting out from the large elevated speakers, and Iris and Jean often had people coming over or stopping by, including my parents and the Goddessmans and the people who'd been semi-adopted by their family, like Melinda and others. There were also cousins who came into town, and I remember hanging out with Louise, who came to stay for periods of time. Afternoons spent with no particular agenda, discussing politics and movies that I must go see, theater, the symphony, and dance. Getting the tour of the latest artwork that they had brought from a trip together, or hearing about the great exhibit downtown, hearing about places that it had never occurred to me to travel to. Iris and Jean were the first people who ever told me that I must go to Iceland. I still haven't, but they will be my inspiration. I remember sitting around reading and exchanging sections of the paper, sleepovers, and being the last one up at night with Iris as we read or watched whatever was on TV. Iris, my dad, and I, all December birthdays, were all unapologetic night owls. I remember missing my first flight from San Francisco to West Virginia once because Chicago O'Hare did its thing and my friend and I needed a place to crash overnight. So what to do? Calling the Rotbergs from Chicago and saying I'd land at Dulles at 11:30 p.m. Could I stay over? Coming to the house after midnight to be surprised by Melinda and hanging out chatting until 2:30 in the morning. Iris stayed up even after that. Talking to Iris over dinner as we watched Trump's first horrible inauguration, aptly titled American Carnage, while we ate from more platters of food. Thai, wreath and planned for the Women's March the next day, where I marched with Diana and Emma and millions of other pissed off women. Listening to Iris and Jean talk about politics and education, the Supreme Court, art and travel with my parents, and later about travel with us, and still later with Diana and Pam's kids. And Jean often seemed to be up in the clouds enthusing about something incredible, while Iris simply appeared to be more quietly amused or alternately challenging some of the finer points, and was definitely the grounding force of the family. And while I never consciously figured this out until now, Iris liked to get set up where she was and have everything around her that gave her comfort and pleasure, and then sit back and enjoy it, interjecting just to keep things interesting. Jean was the sun and she was the moon, and in that she shone in the night. What I don't remember about Iris Rotberg. I have never witnessed Iris cooking or baking anything ever. Apologies if she did. She arranged food that were prepared by others on platters very nicely. Iris working out or even talking about exercise. Iris seeming to be concerned about Diana or her whereabouts. Iris ever being fussy or worried about a mess being created. Iris not wanting to have a conversation or saying she was too busy. Any discussion of rock music in any form. Iris never failing to order a Coke at dinner no matter the cuisine. Iris not being interested in me or my friends or Diana or Pam's friends. By all accounts, including hers, Iris lived a full and incredible life. I would have loved to have known her as a young contrarian, someone who figured out who the hypocrites were and was ready to speak truth to power with calm and logic and subtle humor and maybe her warm laugh. I wish I'd asked her about being at the March on Washington. I'm not sure why I didn't realize what a feminist she was, one who was a trailblazer without holding a sign and chanting, which I have done, but I realize it now. We talked about ideas, but also about the here and now. We talked about why we like one Olympic skater or ice dancer over another. We talked about various DC scandals. I witnessed family discussion where complex travel plans were executed, where people connected in one country and then split up to 3 other ones. I still have a list of the best operas I should see that Iris wrote out for me, and I love that she didn't judge me for never having seen an opera, except for La Traviata, the film. But she was excited for me to enter that world, which I'm embarrassed to say is still on my to-do list. It is hard to witness our parents and friends and even our own lives begin to slow down and unwind and transition to the world of memory. For those of us who are now wishing we had time for a few more conversations, the loss is so profound. And while I'm pretty sure that Iris may not believe in an afterlife, you never know. She was pretty open-minded, and I'll leave it at that. Rest in peace and power. And so with all of those beautiful words and stories and so much about Iris swimming around us, we turn now to these moments of farewell. As we say goodbye to Iris's physical presence here with us. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach Yishem Adonai Mevorach Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher yatzar etchem b'tuvo v'himit etchem b'adin v'natah b'tochechem chayei olam Baruch atah Adonai Dayan ha'emet atah gibor le'olam Adonai Rav le'hoshia mechalkel chaim b'chesed mechayei hakol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Berachah Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato Lishemei Afar, Vichamocha Ba'al Gilurot Mito Mala, Malach Meimi Tumechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua, Baruch atah Adonai Notea B'tochenu, Chaye Olam. Dayan ha'emet, shofet tzedek ve'emet, Baruch Dayan ha'emet, ki chol mishpatav tzedek ve'emet, nefesh kol chai be'yadecha, tzedek ma'a yamincha be'yadecha, rachim al pleit ratzon yadecha, v'tomar l'malach, perech yadecha, gadol ha'itza v'rav ha'aliyah, asher einecha, v'kuchot al chol derechai b'nei adam, La tela ish kidracha v'chiper me'alalav lahagid ki asher Adonai suri v'lo avatabo Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach Yishem Adonai mevorach ve'hu v'michaper avon v'lo yashlit ve'hir bala hashiva po v'lo ya'ir po chamato.
So we're going to take just 1 second now to participate in this beautiful tradition. Bring a shovel full of the earth over here, and we're going to put this shovel. One of the things we do in Jewish tradition is to help our loved ones to say goodbye to by literally filling their graves with earth. Yep, that's perfect. Yeah. No, this is good. We're just gonna do this so that Jean has a chance to participate, and then we'll take this shovel for you, Jean, and we're gonna. Nope, hold on, Maggie's gonna take it now. Go ahead, you can let go. Good job. So we have this opportunity to just help to make sure that our loved ones are in this place of peace and rest, and it's important to us to be able to do that. We'll wrap that up so that you know. And what I'm going to ask you is, I think that we might want to get Jean inside, is that if there is family who wants, who feels really strongly about coming to help participate in this, I don't want to take that opportunity from you. And anybody else who would like to, you are welcome to put your earth into the grave as soon as we're done with our service. Does that feel okay, so that we can conclude and get you in the wall? And then anybody that wants to, it doesn't invalidate your contribution of earth to this grave if we you guys okay to do right after? Okay. So with that, I'm going to ask those who are able, certainly not Jean, to rise as they can for our memorial prayer. El Male Rachamim Shochen Bamrodim Hamseminu Chanechona Tachat Kanfe Hashina Im Kedoshim Utehorim Kezohar Haraki Amazirim Et Nishmat Yakirena Shehalecha Le'olama Vala Rachamim Yasireha Veseter Knafav Le'olamim Ve'yisror B'trachayim Et Nishmata Adonai Hunachalata V'tanuach B'shalom Al Mishkava Tenomar Amen. God of abundant mercy, God most high, may the soul of our loved one who has gone into eternity find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, together with the holy and pure, whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, hold Iris close to you forever, so that her soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May she find a home with you, and may she rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. And the very last thing we're going to do is say a concluding prayer of mourning and memory. These are the words of the mourner's Kaddish. They are in Aramaic, of all things. They are words that don't even really talk about death, and yet in Jewish tradition, they make us think of memory and mourning more than anything. For those of you for whom this is not your tradition, or this is not a set of words that you're familiar with, at the very end, we'll say a line in English, and everybody will have the opportunity to say Amen, because we can't say this prayer alone. It really helps to have people around us, and I invite you all to say Amen with us strongly. Ready? Yitkadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Ve'alma, Divra, Firute, Ve'amlich, Malchute, V'chayechon, Uvyomechon, Uchaye, Dechol Beit Yisrael, Va'agala, Uvizman, Pari, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah, Mevorach, Le'olam, U'le'amei Almaya. Yitbarach, V'yishtavach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalav, Shmei Dekudisha, Brichu, La'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, ta'amiran be'alma v'yimru, Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru, Amen. Oseh shalom mimrama, huya aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru, Amen. May God, who makes peace and sends peace and comfort to all who mourn, send comfort to those among us who are bereaved, and we all say together, Amen. Amen. And we conclude with these final words. Adonai, Go your way, for God has called you. Go your way and may God be with you. May your righteousness go before you and the glory of God receive you. And we end with words from tradition of Akomi Nachem et Tach Sha'ar of Leit Zion v'Yerushalayim. May God comfort all of you amongst all of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. May you find great comfort in these beautiful memories that you have shared. Thank you for sharing them with me. This concludes our service. Anybody who wants to is welcome to come and participate in putting some earth into the grave. Okay, for all the folks out there who are live streaming, I'm just going to conclude the stream. Thank you for your presence. Bye.